Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 91 for the 20th of Adar Aleph in a leap year. And we are still in the middle of chapter 30. And once again, today's Tanya is going to be a really good example of how the Alter Rebbe's philosophy on life and how we should live our life really is in stark contrast to a lot of what is promulgated by our culture nowadays and in modern society. So there's this prevailing notion, maybe most predominantly in the US, that bigger is better and that we should really be our full selves and extroversion predominates and big personalities are the most powerful. And if you have something on your mind, you should say it right away and you shouldn't hold back and you should just do anything that is true that you are feeling in the moment, then speak it. Even when it comes to gossip, I've seen articles out there that are actually trying to, I think there might have even been a whole book about this, that are trying to exonerate gossip from its evil connotations and talk about how and rationalize why gossip is actually something that is really good for us and is really natural for people and is healthy and therapeutic and all that stuff. So what we're going to learn about today is this is in stark contrast to what the Alter Rebbe believes and what the Alter Rebbe asserts in terms of how we live our lives. So the theme of today's episode is really going to be about self-restraint and about the value of self-restraint. So to put this episode into the context of what we've been learning about so far in this chapter is in the very beginning of this chapter, we talked about this idea that we really need to learn how to be humble and feel humble in front of everybody and not think of ourselves as being better than anybody else and self-righteous in any way or holier than thou. And this is true whether it's in terms of just ourselves in relation to other people. And then also when we just really focus on our own service of God, we really have to constantly be working on ourselves and constantly be pushing ourselves past our comfort zone. And we focused up until now in terms of more proactive kind of things, like if we're praying, if we're studying Torah, if we're doing more active kind of mitzvahs, these are areas that we can really understand how we need to really toil and work on ourselves and move outside our comfort zone. And in today's Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain how this is similarly true. This level of struggle and this level of moving beyond our comfort zone can actually also be applied when it comes to the refraining from doing things that are against God's will. So, and it can be in really subtle ways. So it doesn't have to be in these like really big ways. So we'll learn about how this act of self-restraint and this act of really maximizing our full potential in this way it can actually be manifest in very, very small ways, in ways that might seem really simplistic. And it kind of goes back to this idea of don't just do something, stand there. Sometimes it's merely the act of not doing something when you have the impulse to do it. So let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains it. So the Alter Rebbe says that this meaning this idea of really pushing ourselves to our max is even in the aspect of refraining from doing bad. So every person who is a thinking person can find within their soul that he is not fully moving away from bad. So this is something we have to all strive for, at least when it comes to things that have to do with waging a really strong war. So it's like, okay, maybe we are not always engaging in negative behavior all the time, but are we really doing this in a fighting way? Like, are we really restraining ourselves in an active way? So this is what the Alter Rebbe wants us to do. He wants us to really find an active aspect of restraint, have it be a war, that we should really be fighting with ourselves to restrain ourselves. And he says, even if it's not something so extreme, it doesn't have to be this like really big, intense thing, but it could be a small thing. It could be like in a small way. For example, and he gives a really concrete example, to stop yourself in the middle of a pleasant conversation or some kind of story that is negative about your fellow. So let's say you have a really juicy piece of gossip and it's really fun for you to talk about and it's going to be really enjoyable, and you stop yourself in the middle of telling it. This would be an example from this. And even if it's not something that's like really derogatory towards your fellow man, but it's even like a really small mockery, like something so subtle, even if it's true, so it's not something you're making up and it's not something that's really, really defamatory, it's just like a little bit of like a tease. And even if it's in order to cleanse yourself, so even if it's in order to save face, so to speak, for yourself. And then the Alter Rebbe here brings an example of this, that this comes from the Gemara in Bava Basra in the beginning of chapter 10 on page 164b, where there was a situation where Rabbi Shimon said to his father, who is Rabbeinu HaKadosh, about a certain problematic bill of divorce that was not written the right way. He said, I did not write it. Yehuda the tailor wrote it. So this was true. So it was true that he didn't write it. So Rabbi Shimon was trying to like save his own face and cover up for himself and not make himself look bad by telling his father, I didn't write this problematic bill of divorce. But nevertheless, the father answered him and he said, keep away from slander. So even if like there's kind of like this misconception of that slander or gossip is only gossip or slander if it is false, if it's not true, but this isn't the case at all. This is actually even if something's true, if you hear gossip from somebody and you say that's not nice to say, and the person says, well, it's true, it doesn't matter if it's true. So this is not the time for it, but there's actually a whole section of laws regarding Lashon Hara, regarding gossip, that go into extreme detail as to what's considered negative thought or good thought. But here, the Alter Rebbe is making it very simple, that even if you say the slightest little thing, the slightest bit of teasing, mockery, something negative about somebody, even if it's true, even if it's just to not let yourself look bad, this is not okay. And this is an area that we can practice this level of self-restraint in. And the Alter Rebbe says that there's a lot of areas that this can apply to. So there's many things that happen very frequently with regard to this. So this is the idea of that we should sanctify ourselves in regard to permitted matters. And this is a biblical commandment. So it's not something extra. And the Alter Rebbe brings a citation to support this. This is from Vayikra. It's actually written in two places. Vayikra chapter 19 verse 2 and Vayikra chapter 20 verse 7, where it says, Ktoshim tiyu chule, so you shall be holy, and v'yitkadashtem, which again means, and you should sanctify yourselves. And what does this mean to be holy or to sanctify yourself? Well, we spoke about this a little bit previously. It means sanctifying yourself in regard to permitted matters. So it doesn't mean just following the letter of the law. It means developing this like extra sensitivity to, even if you're allowed to do something and even if there's nothing wrong with it, like explicitly, to still develop this kind of spiritual sensitivity to not overindulge, to not just like go with your whims, with your animal soul at any time. And then the Alter Rebbe addresses the fact that there is an opinion that this is not a biblical origin to sanctify yourself in this kind of way and practice this level of self-restraint, and it's only rabbinic. The Alter Rebbe here brings a proof from this that this is still not something to not adhere to, because it says in Sanhedrin, in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 88b, that rabbinical enactments are even stricter than biblical laws. So just because something doesn't come from the Bible, it just comes from rabbinical sources, it doesn't mean we should ignore it. And in fact, we should think of it as even stricter. And so then the Alter Rebbe ends off here and he says that there's a lot of these type of things we've been talking about and similar things to this are amongst those things which the phrase that's used for this is from Avodah Zarah, page 18a, where it says me'avonot sheha'adam dash ba'kavav, which literally means the sins which people trample underfoot, meaning to say that they're very common. It's very, very commonplace. And so commonplace that people tend to think of it as permissible. So things like gossip, or not even really harsh gossip, but things like saving your face, or little acts of kind of not restraining yourself in little tiny ways. These are things that are so common and so frequent that people might not even realize that they are problematic and that they're not allowed. But the Alter Rebbe is being very explicit that they are very much problematic and they're very much not allowed. And so this is what this section is about. So again, just to sum it up, is this value that we have in society nowadays that if you have something on your mind, you must speak it. If you feel the impulse to do something, you must do it. This is in stark contrast to what the Alter Rebbe teaches in his Tanya, and specifically focusing on today, which is that there is a very strong value in self-restraint. And not only is there value in self-restraint, we should actively work on self-restraint. And the same way that we actively push ourselves to go over and above our comfort zone when it comes to more proactive kind of things like praying, learning Torah, or giving tzedakah and stuff like that, practicing self-restraint should be something that we work at just as actively and just as difficultly. And we should make it just as difficult for ourselves, and it should be just as much of a battle. So that is it for today, and we will continue tomorrow. And tomorrow we're going to complete this chapter. I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.